Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is Bill Carney. Bill is the founder and director of Chattanooga Woodworking Academy. Bill, welcome to My Morning Cup. Before I ask if that job selling for Xerox was more fulfilling than building custom furniture, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
Now?
Yeah, anytime. What do you have first thing in the morning? You a coffee guy?
Oh, yeah. I got to get up. I'm an early riser, get up usually about 5, make the coffee, catch the morning news.
Yeah. What do you take in your coffee, or you take it black?
Oh, cream. Got to have cream. And the first cup, honey.
Really?
Yes. And my wife is a coffee snob, so we have good coffee. And I usually drink a cup with honey and half mixed up, the first cup, and then the second cup I leave the honey out.
So you came to my attention through a friend. He said, have you heard of Chattanooga Woodworking Academy? And I had heard about it, but I hadn't experienced it. And that's why I wanted to talk to you more. But before we get to that, I want to talk about how you got to Chattanooga Woodworking Academy. So you were actually born in Dayton and raised in Saudi, huh?
Right. My dad, after the war, he came back to the farm. He was raised on a farm, and he came back, and he was going to try farming with his dad. And he did that for a while until he decided he needed to make more money, basically.
Yeah. And
so DuPont had just built a plant here out in Hickson. So he came down and applied for a job at DuPont, got the job, and we moved from Ray County to Daisy. That was probably about 1950.
And that was before Saudi and Daisy came together, right?
Oh, yeah. It was, that was the end of the world, basically. The reason we moved there was because it was closer to his job in Hickson.
Yeah.
And so he kept a job there for 40 years. That was a time when you went somewhere and you got a job and you stayed. And DuPont was a good fit for him because he was always coming off the farm. He was a hard worker.
What kind of farming?
Everything. They row cropped. They had cattle. Till after the war, it was poverty.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a tough way to live because in Ray County and when he was growing up during the Depression, there was no industry there. There wasn't much of an opportunity except manual labor on the farm. And he liked farming. I mean, as I was growing up, we always had cows and horses and those kinds of things. He didn't do it for money, but he did it because he liked it.
Yeah, he grew up with it, and that was his lifestyle.
Right. And he could harness a horse to any kind of farm implement, buggy. He enjoyed horses, and I grew up with horses. I like horses. I was able to, as a child, grow up and ride my horse to the creek to swim. And back in those days, in the 50s and 60s out in Daisy, there wasn't any traffic. People have asked me, didn't you not like growing up out there? And I said, no, I loved it. I liked the outdoors. I liked riding my horse. I liked going to the creek.
Very idyllic life. Huh?
Absolutely.
Did your mom and dad growing up in the Depression have an effect on you as a kid? Because I look back like at my grandparents. They were savers. They held on to everything. They stretched everything they could.
Oh yeah, my dad was a hoarder of everything. I remember one time he sent me out to the barn to clean up some stuff, and I loaded up a pile of what I thought was junk in the truck. and it was just various pieces of metal that he had saved. And no, you never throw away your metal, because they always needed something to repair a piece of equipment or whatever. His dad was that way. He was a big saver. Their goal in life was to make my life and my sister's life much better than theirs had been.
Yeah.
He had 9 brothers and sisters, and they didn't have a car until basically when the Depression hit in 1929. From about 1930, his dad didn't have a car until 1940.
Wow.
So when they went places, it was in a wagon or they rode with somebody else, but they didn't have an automobile.
A lot of walking.
Oh, yeah. And every one of his sisters and brothers, him included, when they got out and got a good job, they either had a Cadillac or a Lincoln. And they lived in brick houses.
Well, that's why you work hard.
Sure.
But so you grew up out in the country, and very much a country lifestyle. Were most of the jobs you did stuff around, because you weren't on a farm at this point, stuff around the house, or did you have high school jobs?
My dad was he worked full-time at DuPont, and he worked for 40 years swing shift. So he worked first, second, third shifts. And on second and third, he could have his days off if he wanted to and sleep, around that. So he always had something going. He was always remodeling, adding a porch on somebody's house. He would do concrete work, tile work. He was just a hustler.
So you grew up in this, and that's kind of where you learned.
Well, that's where I learned. That's kind of where I got my love of carpentry.
Yeah.
Was working with him. And he was not a carpenter. He was a nail driver. But he knew what plumb and square was, and he could build, but he was not a trained carpenter. But I told him before he died, the thing I got from my dad was he was never afraid to tackle anything, whether he could do it or not. He would try. He'd learn on the job.
Figure it out, huh?
Yeah. And by the time I was probably 15, 16 years old, he'd built several houses by then. And I was the lead carpenter because I had a knack for it.
Yeah.
My mother's daddy worked, he was a carpenter, and a master carpenter. And he started out with Norris Dam with TVA, and he came down the river building dams with TVA. He died in 1942. He was working on Chickamauga Dam, and he was the carpenter foreman. That's where I got my ability as far as being able to do carpenter work, was probably from him, because Daddy was a farmer.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted things in life. He wanted land. He wanted to have a nice home. He wanted to send us to school. So he worked. When he wasn't working at DuPont, he was working somewhere, doing something. And he always told me, he said, son, you make your bill money on your job, and anything extra in life you make after the job. And that stuck with me.
Yeah.
That's always been my byword, I guess you'd say. And I tell my students, look, there's 2 ways you can go with woodworking. You can work for the other guy. You can be his best guy in the shop. You can make a good living. You can go home at 4 o'clock and get in a recliner and watch TV and drink beer, and that's it. Or you can go in business for yourself, at which point you're going to work 7 days a week. You're going to work long hours. You're going to, there are going to be times when you don't have any money, but occasionally you get that big fat check. And it's kind of like playing golf. You go out and you hit a lot of bad shots, and then you finally hit that great shot, and you think, well, I like golf. I'm pretty good at this.
It's what keeps you coming back.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you grew up around this, and when you decided to go to school, after you graduated SpeakEasy High School, you chose MTSU. Was that specifically you wanted to get into woodworking, or?
Well, mainly I wanted to avoid Vietnam. I mean, to be honest with you, my best friend in high school joined the Marine Corps while we were in high school. And when he graduated, he went straight to the Paris Island, to the Marine Corps. And then he went straight to Vietnam and got killed within a week.
Wow. And
at 18, 19 years old, for whatever reason, I saw the folly in Vietnam. Yeah. I didn't think it was worth my life.
Yeah.
Of course, my mom, I was going to college. She was bound and determined that I was going to college.
Well, you said both your parents wanted something better for you and your sister, and I'm sure that started in their mind with college.
Oh, sure. My dad quit school and when he was a sophomore and joined the Army and went to World War II.
Yeah.
My mother struggled through and graduated high school as an orphan. Her dad died in 1942 when she was 12 years old. So she had a hard time being able just to finish high school. And college really wasn't a reality for her. But she wanted us to have a better life. She wanted us to be educated. She was the intellectual of the family. Dad, nah. I don't know if he ever read a book in his life. But she always bought me art supplies, books, encouraged me. As a young child, I was born with the ability to draw. I didn't train for it. I just had it. Like some people can play music, I could draw.
Just freehand drawn.
Yeah, So when I got to college, I didn't know what to do. I thought, well, I'll be an engineer. Engineers are, it's a very respectable profession. They make good money, blah, blah, blah. So I got into all those hard math classes, calculus, trig, and all that. I said, I think I'll find something else. So I kind of just sidestepped into industrial management and really had no idea what that was all about until I got in. But then as I got into that, you could specialize in wood technology. Well, I'd already had experience building.
Yeah.
And I like to create, like to build things. And I had part of that major, I had to take a woodshop class. When I got into that woodshop class, it was taught by a guy who's probably my age. I thought he was an old man. He was an old man, but he was a master furniture maker. And I was just intrigued by the whole process of taking rough lumber and making something really beautiful out of it.
Creating something.
Yeah. And as I decided, I took another class from him. After that first class, I took one so I could get more. And he told me that if I would apply myself, that I had natural talent and I had a good sense of design. He said, you can make a living in the woodworking business, making furniture, cabinets, whatever, or you could teach. There's always a demand for teachers in woodshop because back then, every high school had a woodshop, and a lot of the junior highs had wood shops. That was and you had to stand in line to get in that class. So after I graduated college, kind of like a lot of people do, I just flopped around for a while. I made some applications to Combustion. It was a big company here in Chattanooga. Yep. I made an application there. Ford Motor Company in Nashville. I think DuPont here. I had job offers on all three. But while I was going to college, my dad got me a summer job at DuPont, working in the plant. I hated it. It wasn't a hard job.
Yeah.
But just going in there was like going into a prison for me.
Didn't challenge you. It was very rote.
Just the noise, the smell, just repetitive work. Nothing hard, but just having to be there. And I said, I'm never working in a plant. So that industrial management thing, I can forget that. So I didn't even consider going to work for any of those big companies, even though they paid well.
Yeah.
I thought, my advisor, Mr. Dalton, always said we could always teach. So I thought, what the heck? I'll try that.
Yeah.
So I went out to I went to the Board of Education here in Chattanooga and told them I wanted to teach school. And now I had never had an education course. And they said, well, handed me a big, thick sheaf of paper and said, here, fill all this stuff out. Come back in a couple of weeks. And she said, by the way, what do you want to teach? And I said, woodshop. She said, whoa, come here. I got 5 schools. And so I went around and looked in the county, and Lookout Valley had a brand new shop. At that time, in the early 1970s, the state was building vocational schools everywhere. And even if they didn't have a freestanding school, they would build an annex to a high school and provide woodshop, auto mechanics, those kinds of things. So I went out there and walked into the woodshop as an untrained educator and struggled through that first year teaching woodshop and discovered that I loved teaching as well as I did building.
What did you like about teaching?
I just enjoy seeing people learn. And it was a challenge, but
were there other teachers that helped you through it, or was it you walked in your first day, you don't have a teaching background, but you love woodworking?
Yeah.
I mean, how did you tackle that?
Well, the guy next door to the shop was a drafting teacher who had taught woodworking. He was an older fella, he'd been there for 25 years or whatever, teaching drafting and woodshop, and he gave me a lot of good pointers and advice. I mean, one of the things he told me, and you probably blocked this out, but he said, son, you start out a son of a bitch and you lighten up to a bastard. Because as a new teacher, I wanted everybody to like me.
Yeah.
That's what you want to do. You want to be liked by your students. You want to
be the popular teacher.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that helped me because I got away from that feeling of trying to be their buddy.
Yeah.
And being their teacher.
Kind of like being a parent.
Yeah, pretty much. And, you just have to have discipline. And discipline is not easy if you're buddies.
Yeah.
There has to be a separation there.
And that's true with, basically any job you tackle. If you're in a supervisory position, you're not doing your people who work with you much good if you're trying to be their buddy.
No, not at all. It's kind of like your kids. They'll love you more if they know where they're going, if they have guidelines. Kids like discipline. I mean, contrary to popular belief, they like to have a structure.
Yeah.
So
they don't like unknowns. If discipline gives you knowns.
Right. One of the things that I loved about teaching that first year is back then they put a lot of the kids that couldn't read or discipline problems were truants in the woodshop. We'll put them over in the woodshop. They can't pass English, they can pass woodshop. And what I enjoyed about that was the kid who never had any success in school was just turned off to school, basically. Yeah. Doesn't mean he was stupid or not bright. Just at some point early in his career, he got classified as a slow learner, a discipline problem, blah, blah, blah. That went in his file. I never wanted to see their file.
Yeah.
I didn't want to have a preconceived idea of who they were before I got them.
That's smart.
And you see these kids that never had any success in school, and they get on the bus, they've got a project they made in the shop, and some kid in the beta club starts talking to them about their project, because they admire them.
Yeah.
So they start blooming. They start becoming what they didn't know they could become.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because we're kind of in a full circle with vocational.
Right.
You said back in the 70s, every school had a wood shop. Every school had an auto mechanics shop. And you're right. Kids got put in there based on those issues that they may have had, whether academics, maybe discipline problem. They got pushed aside.
Yeah.
But you really gave them a chance to find out what excited them and who they really were.
Well, nothing succeeds like success.
Mm-hmm.
If they get in there and discover that they can do things, that maybe some of the other kids, the smart kids, can't do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that gives them a lot of satisfaction in their own self, gives them some self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard enough going to high school, without you being pigeonholed as some kind of other.
Mm-hmm.
And I always enjoyed that. I always enjoyed seeing the kids that had been kind of cast aside, brought back in.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the projects that you would do with them? Because by the time I got into high school, woodworking and auto mechanics was pretty much gone, and the focus was on everyone being college ready.
Sure.
And not everyone's designed for college.
No, but and I get this a lot. People say, well, should I go to college or should I come to the woodworking school? I say, look, I'm a college-educated cabinet maker, okay? You need both.
Right.
If you're going to, especially if you're going to have your own shop and you're going to have your own business, you need to know how to market yourself. You need to know how to balance that checkbook. So you need things that you get in college, courses that you can take in college. It's never, ever going to hurt you to get educated.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell people, keep reading, keep going to school. It's just going to better you.
How long were you at Lookout Valley?
1 year.
Did you stay with teaching and woodworking?
Well, here's what happened. I enjoyed teaching. I even was an assistant football coach. Enjoyed that. I was on my way home I didn't enjoy the money, although I was used to having no money because I was a college student.
Yeah.
Anything's better than college. So I was on my way home from school one day, and I lived out in Red Bank, had an apartment out there. I pulled up to a red light, and I was driving this junker car that I'd had in college that's barely making it. And up next to me pulls a guy in a brand new Grand Prix. Well, he was a guy I knew.
Ooh.
He was from Chattanooga. He'd gone to Tennessee Tech. I'd gone to Middle Tennessee, but somehow or another we had a connection. I know what it was. We were both Sigma Chi's. So I rolled the window down. His name was Bill.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill, what are you doing, man? Where did you get that car? What's going on? He said, man, I work for Xerox. I said, oh, okay. So the next time I had a day off during the week, got dressed up, went to the Xerox office, somehow managed to talk my way around the receptionist and got in and talked to the manager of the Xerox place here in Chattanooga. It was out in Brainerd. I talked myself into a job. And so I left. That was right before school was out. So I left that summer. I started Xerox, I think, probably July, something like that.
So you were selling for them?
Yes. And then 1971, this was 1972, Xerox was the best company in America.
Yeah.
They had the best stock. They had they had the only plain paper copier on the market because of their they had a patent on it.
Oh, there you go.
They had a patent on the plain paper process, which everybody else, including IBM, did not have. They had these greasy copies or ditto machine copies.
The mimeograph that you would, when you're in school, you'd pick it up and you'd smell it.
Right, exactly. So they were just enjoying phenomenal success and growth. And I went from making $6,500 a year teaching school to $21,000.
That's a big difference.
Huge. Of course, what did I do? Went and bought a brand new car, got me a townhouse, bought me a new wardrobe, tried to drink all the liquor I could.
Any luck?
Well, I did pretty good there for a while. But, and I had some success at Xerox because when I was going to college one summer, I sold vacuum cleaners.
Wow, that's some great training there.
Best course I ever had, better than college.
Yeah. Because
I learned about selling. And everything in life is buy-sell.
Mm-hmm.
You're either buying or you're selling. And I just learned so much, and I was good at it, and I made a lot of money that summer. And that just kind of carried over in my life. I went from being somebody that didn't talk too much to just blah, 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 blah. And the guy that had the vacuum cleaner sales place, his name was Jim Little. He had an ad in the paper, $400 a week guaranteed. Well, that was a lot of money back in 1970, 71, 72. No, this was in the 60s. This was while I was still in school. So that was more money than my dad made in a month.
Yeah.
He had a good job at DuPont. So I thought, boy, I'm going to go down there and check this out. And I asked the guy on the phone, I said, what is this? He said, oh, you'll have to come down. So I get down there, and it's a vacuum cleaner place.
Yeah. That's why he told you had to come down.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, look, I can't sell vacuum cleaners. What the hell? He said, stay with me till noon. I'll buy you lunch down at Wally's. Well, okay, because I had no money. I thought, great. Well, by noon, he had me sold. I was sold on the product. It was Kirby, great vacuum cleaners. And this was a time when people were putting wall-to-wall carpet in. It was happening. That's what everybody wanted to go with, wall-to-wall carpet. Well, that just blew up the vacuum cleaner business. I mean, if you had wall-to-wall carpet, you had to have a vacuum cleaner. And so I learned all about body language, when to shut up, what to do, what to say. One of the main things was never ask a person a question they can answer with no. And another big thing I learned from Jim Little was about security, job security. We were sitting in this class, and he was teaching us about vacuum cleaners, and there were probably 10 people in there and all different ages. And he asked different ones. He said, what would you say is job security? And people said, well, if you got a good job like at Combustion or DuPont or one of the insurance companies, you get benefits, you get a pretty good payday, and, it's going to be there. And he said, well, it might not be there. They might decide that they're going to close the DuPont plant and move it to North Carolina. So where's your job security then? Are you going to move to North Carolina? Are you going to try to find something else? So job security really is in your head. If you're secure in your head, doesn't matter. You can succeed in anything. And that stuck with me. And I've always had a lot of self-confidence. I've always thought, well, I can make it. Now, that went back to my dad, who would tackle anything.
Yeah.
And so I'd say that's probably been one of the big influences in my life, is to come to the realization that if you're secure in your head, you can do anything.
And there's people like me who it takes 50, 60 years to figure that out.
Right.
It's do you believe in yourself?
Well, after the Xerox experience, which was about 18 months, I was working with these guys, most of them were in their 30s, very successful, made a lot of money, had a new home, had kids, had a big car, and the pressure on them was immense.
They're miserable, weren't they?
They were. Most of them were drunks. Most of them, after the day was over, they hit some bar for happy hour and got drunk.
Yeah.
And they showed up the next day with Pepto-Bismol in the front seat because their stomach was upset. And, in that business or any high-level sales business, if you succeed this month, you're a hero.
Right.
If you don't succeed next month, you're getting a memo written in red.
Yep.
And with threats. And I thought, I'm 23 years old. I thought, do I want to live like this? I mean, the money's great, but all this, this corporate thing where they just train you up and they work the hell out of you and burn you out by the time you're in your 30s. Then they want to get rid of you and get a 23-year-old.
Exactly. And what a mature thing to know at 23 years old.
Well, I don't know if it was that or not, but I figured out that wasn't what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I love teaching. And, of course, I love woodworking.
Yeah.
I thought, well, if I go back to school and get a professional certification in teaching, then that can be my career, and I can work in the shop and build stuff and start working to the time I can have my own shop.
So you went back to school and got your certification?
I did. I went back to Middle Tennessee. I opened a little furniture repair, picture framing shop off the square in Murfreesboro, and made my living there and went to school. Went to school full-time, worked full-time.
So you decided to go back to school, but simultaneously you opened a small business.
Well, I had to live. I mean, I had to have money. And I thought, even back then, Murfreesboro was a fairly affluent little place. And I thought if I get in the furniture thing now, which I was already trained. I knew about furniture. I knew about woodworking. I think maybe I can do my business here and get established. And, I did okay. I made a living and went to school full time.
Was that Carney and Company?
No. Well, I guess it was. It was, Carney. I know my sign looked like I took my sign from a Leon Russell album, Carney. It had this beautiful
I remember
logo.
the album. Yeah.
So that was another thing I learned while I was going to college is I learned how to paint signs. I came home again one summer and had no job, and there was an advertisement for a sign painter. And I had made the signs. I was in a fraternity, so when we had a ball game or something, I always made the signs, for the football game or whatever. And I thought, well, I could fake my way through this. So I go over, it's on Brainerd Road. The guy that owned the shop was a guy named Bobby Demas. His dad was a famous gynecologist here in Chattanooga who, just a great doctor, had a big following. And Bob had gone to college at UTC for a couple of years, didn't like it, but was a natural artist. Mm-hmm. So he started a sign business, just a little one-man sign shop over on Brainerd Road. So when I went over to talk to him, he gave me a little sign to paint. And I struggled through it, And he said, well, I could see you've got a little ability, but I think probably I can train you. He said, I'll give you $65 a week, and when you get to where you can lay out and paint a sign yourself, I'll raise you to $100. I said, deal. So by the end of the summer, I was painting signs.
Sounds like you had a little bit of your dad's I'll figure it out confidence in you.
I did. And, like I said before, I could always draw.
Yeah.
And sign painting, a lot of it is technique. The brushes, the paint. Of course, you got to be able to lay out to get a good layout. But I'd had drafting in college, so I had that. And he was able to train me. He was a good teacher. And by the end of the summer, I was doing most of the work while he was at the beach with some blonde, because he was a wild man. He was 24, 5 years old. He was a total wild man.
Yeah, enjoying life. Huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I had that in my tool bag too.
So you did the Xerox thing. You decide, what, teaching's my passion.
Yeah.
And you go back and teach. Where do you get your next teaching job?
Oak Ridge High School. And how that happened was I thought, well, if I'm going to eventually have my own shop and do my own thing, I need to be somewhere where I can sell it. Smoky Mountains National Park. Yeah. 12 million people come through there. I said, well, I need to get a teaching job on the perimeter of the park, North Carolina, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. So I made myself a resume, and I sent out about 25 resumes to all the counties that bordered the park. And I got back about 20 offers.
Really?
Yeah.
You were a marketer before you knew it.
Yeah.
You identified the population you wanted to hit and figured out a way to get to them.
Well, I figured that was my market, was Gatlinburg, because people come through there and buy stuff. And there was a shop there in Gatlinburg, these two brothers, and I used to go there and talk to them. They were furniture makers, and they made just beautiful stuff. And they made little cheap wooden souvenir stuff. So I was talking to them. I said, what's the main deal here? I mean, why are you mixed up like this? You do this great work and you do this cheap work.
Right.
They said, well, in the wintertime, we build furniture because there aren't any tourists coming through. In the summertime, we build the cheap junk and sell it to the tourists. And it's about half and half. So, I thought, well, okay. So I put that.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So I thought, well, I got to start out kind of small and make stuff that people can carry with them and buy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got all these offers all around the park. The best offer was Oak Ridge. They, at that time, were one of the highest paid systems in the South, not just Tennessee. So I went from making $6,500 a year teaching here at Lookout Valley, and a couple of years later in Oak Ridge, I'm making $18,000 for teaching.
And this is a time when Oak Ridge is still kind of that secret hidden city, isn't it?
Well, they had, it was I like to say that I probably learned more in the teacher's lounge at Oak Ridge High School than I did in college because there were so many PhDs there.
Didn't they have the highest per capita PhDs in the country?
They did. And the kids were smart, and they had federal money. You could get anything you wanted. And it was and I'd never even been to Oak Ridge before that. And when I got up there, I got an apartment in the city. And for a small little town, it was very cosmopolitan because of all these educated people.
They were coming from all over the country, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Plus, the money was just there. The money was flowing freely.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed Oak Ridge. They had a brand new addition to the high school per this vocational thing that the state was doing. So I had a brand new shop to work in. Mm-hmm. And I had a few knuckleheads in class, but by and large, I had smart kids, and I really enjoyed that first year at Oak Ridge. Came home that summer to ride my horse and play, and met my future wife at the creek. So we got all lovey-dovey, and she decided to come back to Oak Ridge with me. So she moved back to Oak Ridge with me, and this was by October, we got married.
Wow.
So I had a new wife, and a lady had come by the school at the end of the first year and wanted to know if I could bring my class and remodel an old house she had over on the lake. And I said, well, it's the end of school. I don't have any students. She said, why don't you just come look? I said, okay. So I go out. She's got this little 2-room shack, but it's on the Clinch River, and you cannot see another human habitation. House was junk. She said, well, what can you do with this? I said, well, it's going to take, quite a bit of stuff to fix this house up to make it livable. I tell you what I'll do. You furnish the material and give me a free year's rent, and I'll remodel your house. So that's what I started doing. I started remodeling that house. And when Marty moved back with me the next year, I was sleeping in a cot in what I called a bedroom of this house. It didn't have any heat or air or anything. But that first year, she and I remodeled that house, made it really nice, cute little farmhouse there on the river. Stayed there another year or so, and she said, I want to move back to Daisy. My brothers and sisters are there, and of course my family was there, and I thought, well, okay. So we moved back to Saudi Daisy. I get a job at Sequoia Vocational School, which was run by a guy had drafting from in high school. So I went by to see the school, and he hired me immediately. He said, hey, I need a woodshop guy. I said, okay, I'm your guy. So I stayed there for another, I think, 3 years. And during that time, we opened a little picture framing shop on Hickson Pike, just a little small thing. And I started building stuff to go in the shop. My wife started framing pictures. Her frame business grew to the point that she was making our living.
Oh, wow.
So the money that I was making teaching, I could put in tools, material.
Yeah.
So at the end of 3 years.
What was the name of the frame shop?
Carney's. So at the end of those 3 years, my dad still had a farm over in Daisy, and he let me build a shop on his farm, a little wood shop. So I stepped out. I came in one day and told Marty, I said, I just quit my teaching job, and we had 2 kids by this time.
Oh, wow.
And we were living in a little rental house, a little 2-bedroom rental house. But she had faith and never looked back. I mean, I went from making I don't know, $14,000-$15,000 a year teaching. First year out there by myself in my little wood shop, I made 35. Now, I worked hard, but big difference.
Yeah.
And now I had a family. So it just kept growing. And my first big commercial job was Heritage Landing, all the cabinet work in Heritage Landing.
Really?
Yeah. I met Tommy Lupton.
Yeah.
Tommy Lupton loved woodworking. We were in a show together at the Chattanooga Convention Center when it first opened.
Mm-hmm.
I told Marty, I said, we got to get a couple of booths down there, and I got to get my stuff down there because everybody in town will be there, all the politicians. So that's what I did.
So you connected with Tommy Lupton because you were both displaying furniture and.
No, he had a display for Heritage Landing.
Okay.
I had bedroom furniture, doors, kitchen cabinets. You know, I had two booths, and I had a kind of a house scene from the kitchen into the bedroom, and just got overwhelmed with work.
Yeah.
And connected with Lupton because he was a closet furniture guy, and he just kept. I didn't know him, but this guy just kept coming over to my booth and looking, and he'd talk to me a little bit, you know, and finally I figured out who he was, and then he said, I'm going to connect you with my decorator that's going to be doing the Heritage Landing thing, and maybe you can do some work. Well, I ended up with all the cabinet work at Heritage Landing. It was $3 or $4 million worth of work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And, of course, couldn't do it in my little shop, so I had to go find a bigger place, and borrow money, buy tools, all that. And that was, I guess that was probably what established me in Chattanooga, because the people that moved into Heritage Landing, especially in the first phase, were Lupton's friends off Lookout. And they were people who wanted to get away from the big house, the yard work, all that stuff, into a condo.
Mm-hmm.
So I connected with these people, and none of them wanted the standard option kitchen. They all updated. And then you got bookcases. Then you got a table for over here. And it just, you know, at one time I had 27 guys working.
That kept you busy for a long time, didn't it?
It did, until I got tired of it. And, I was working 16 hours a day for 2 or 3 years. And I had little kids. And I went to Lupton one day and said, look, I'm getting out. I don't want to do this. I want to go back into my shop and build furniture. Yeah, but you'll make I said, I don't care. I said, I'll make a living. I said, it's not worth it to me to lose all my kids' growing up time to make money.
And I'm going to say this in a way that do you know how many people probably hear you say that and can't make that connection of what's more important?
Well, you get addicted to the money.
Exactly. That's true in so many jobs that people have, because you get golden handcuffs.
Well, you wake up one day and you're 55 years old, and it's almost too late.
So somewhere along the line, someone put a good thought in your head and said, money's not that important.
Well,
happiness is important.
I like money. I'm just like everybody. You know, I like to have money. Money doesn't buy happiness, but it can damn sure rent it. But early on in my life, I figured out, I think probably the Xerox thing helped me figure out that money is not my God. Never has been.
Yeah.
I'm not living to make money.
Yeah.
I have been able to do what I wanted to do in life, and the money has taken care of itself.
And I think that's a great lesson. It will take care of itself. I think we all worry about where's it going to come from, but if you're following that passion.
Hey, if you got a backhoe and you like to dig ditches, you can make money. You can become a millionaire.
Yeah. With
that backhoe.
Well, and in looking at your story, you're connected with Tommy Lupton and a very prominent, influential crowd doing custom work for him, and deciding, I don't want to work like this.
Well, I like to work for the individuals.
Mm-hmm.
I never like to work in for a big company.
Yeah.
The next biggest influence probably was Ruth Holmberg.
Mm-hmm.
I got to do her kitchen. She remodeled a big house out on Elder Mountain, and somebody recommended me. And I went out there and talked to her, and we hit it off. And we shared politics. That helped a whole lot.
I bet, yeah.
But
interesting lady, too.
Oh, she's a great person. I did all her work until she died. And she was great friends with Marty. They clicked big time. And we would be out there at her house working, and Ruth would make our lunch. And we'd go out and sit by the pool and have lunch and talk politics and just became friends. And she really admired my work, my craftsmanship. And she got me a lot of work and lost me a lot of work, because a lot of people say, well, if you're working for Ruth Holmberg, I can't afford you. Yeah. But her buddies that could afford me, if they got a good word from Ruth, I was in.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of being one of the buddies, if Ruth said Bill's the best, I'm going with Bill.
Right. When I had my shop going full blast out in Soddy Daisy, there were probably 30 little cabinet shops around Soddy Daisy and Hickson. And I knew most of the guys.
There's still a handful out and around that area.
Yeah, there's still a few. But these guys that I knew, I'd see them at the lumber yard or whatever, and they'd say, Carney, how are you getting this work on Lookout Mountain? And I said, well, first of all, I'm building in furniture. I'm not trying to build anything that's not top job. That's my main goal, is to do the very best work I can. And those people out there want that. Mm-hmm. They want good stuff. They're not really, now they'll beat on you on the price, but they really want the good stuff. And my motto always is I'm going to give you more than you pay for. I'm going to build in furniture in your house, whether it be kitchen cabinets or vanities or whatever. I'm going to give you that kind of quality, because that's how I was trained. Mm-hmm. I'm a classic, mechanically bench-trained furniture maker.
I want to hit on a couple things before we run out of time, and one of them is you were very instrumental in revitalizing Poe's Tavern.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, in 2008, when we had the big recession, depression, whatever you want to call it.
The Great Recession.
Yeah. It hurt me just like it did everybody, because, the rich people quit spending just like the poor people did. And so luckily, I didn't have any debt. We were out of debt. The kids were out of college. And I came home and I told Marty, I said, I'm going to start a woodworking school. She said, are you crazy? There's a depression on. I said, well, she said, where are you going to get the money? I said, I don't know. I'll figure it out. So I had all these connections with these movers and shakers in Chattanooga. So I put a board of directors together to start with, and Tommy Lupton, Bill Sutterth, Sam Campbell, Moon Pie. Mm-hmm. I built his house, by the way. I had people who were successful in a variety of things in Chattanooga. Lawyer, I had a good lawyer on the board. And we were brainstorming, and now these guys, just because I chose them for the board of directors, they didn't throw me $50,000. I tried to get $5,000 out of them. Yeah. Which most of them ponied up after a while. And I was racking my brain, what am I going to do to raise money? So I thought, being from Soddy Daisy, I have always been a history person. I always loved history. Well, out there, I knew a little bit about Poe's Tavern, the history of Soddy Daisy. So I've read further and discovered that Poe's Tavern was where the Hamilton County started. Mm-hmm. And I thought, there's still Poes that live in Soddy Daisy. Really? So I went to Miss Poe, who I knew, and I talked to her about it. I said, what do you think? Oh, yes, a Poe's Tavern, yes. I said, well, I'm going to see if I can't rebuild Poe's Tavern in Soddy Daisy. And there's a fellow out there that we used to go to church with named Arnold Stultz. He's recently passed away. And Arnold was the head of HR at DuPont for 50 years. So he helped scores, hundreds of people from that area get jobs at DuPont, good paying jobs. So he had a lot of influence in the community. He's a really good guy. So I went to Arnold and told him what my deal was. I said, I want to rebuild Poe's Tavern to help finance my school. So he said, okay, here's what we're going to do. He said, we're going to go to all the commissioners, one-on-one. We're going to get them on our side before you come to the city commission. Mm-hmm. I said, okay. So my son's an architect. He drew up a plan, a park, Poe's Tavern. I went to the city commission at Saudi Daisy. I had all these big charts and pictures and handouts and told them what I wanted to do. Of course, I'd already talked to them.
Yeah.
Unanimously supported it. I sold it to them for $50,000. And Arnold got up and said, I'll raise the money. Won't cost the city a dime.
Wow.
But I had to have that guarantee from the city. Had to have a contract.
That's going to be there, yeah.
So that's the way it happened, and got a contract with them, and I started on it actually down at 13th and whatever that road is, Southern Star Restaurant.
Broad Street.
Well, there wasn't a building behind them then. It was just a big open field.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking around trying to figure out where to start Poe's Tavern. I want to start it downtown because I wanted this publicity.
Yeah.
And somehow or another, the guy that was over Parks and Recreation, Larry Zender.
Yeah.
Somehow I connected with Larry. I told him I wanted to do it at the aquarium. He said, oh, hell. He said, it'll take 2 years to go through the paperwork, blah, blah. He said, I know somebody. So he called this guy that owned that property. He said, yeah, bring it on down. You can do it right there. So we started Poe's Tavern downtown here, and I got up about 3 logs high, and I was just I had a sign up, volunteers welcome Saturdays. So I had these people that came in and helped and worked for free. We got the thing started down there, and then the deal came through the Saudi Daisy, and we moved it up there and finished it up. And by the time we dedicated it was September 2012. The city actually had more money in their treasury than they paid me because of Arnold Stoltz.
Wow.
He got out and we sold logs, $1,000 a log. You get your name on a plaque.
See, you're not only a master carpenter, you're a master marketer. I mean, you financed your school through Poe's Tavern. Before we run out of time, let's talk about Chattanooga Woodworking Academy because I just did a podcast with a gentleman from TVA who really uses woodworking for relaxation. And I think there's a lot of people that may not know about your woodworking academy.
Well, doctors and lawyers and professional people use woodworking to de-stress.
Exactly.
So I have a lot of interest from that. And I used to do a part-time class at night or on the weekends for those folks. Mm-hmm. But it turned into a monster, and I had to quit because it just took all my time. Chattanooga Woodworking Academy started no building, no money to speak of, no tools, nothing. I did have people on my side. Had Tommy Lupton, had Red Parks, TU Parks Construction. Mm-hmm.
That's where relationships are so important.
Oh, yeah, sure. And Red Parks, who I worked for on and off over the years as a subcontractor, he said, let's go to Lyndhurst. I'll hook you up with Bruz Clark, who was running Lyndhurst. And so Red and I go over to Lyndhurst to meet with Bruz Clark, and we walk in and go in the conference room, and down on the end of the table are all these axes and all kinds of woodworking tools, hand tools. And I thought, what's this? Well, Bruz is a wood guy.
There you go.
So we got to talking, and he bought in immediately. And he said, well, here's the deal. We'll give you a grant of $150,000. You got a year to match it. The last day of that year, I got the last $10,000. And so Poe's Tavern was part of that. That was $50,000. And then I went to Benwood, and they said, well, if Lyndhurst is going to give you $50,000, or 150. We'll give you 50. So I got 50 from them and 50 from Poe's Tavern. And I don't know.
You just put it together.
Yeah. I just, went and begged, borrowed, steal, did my song and dance. And it happened.
So if someone signs up for the school, how long is it in terms of, is it a year-long program? What do they do?
It's a 4-year program.
4-year program.
It's like going to college to learn woodworking. Now, some people want to come for 2 years and head out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. But they've got just enough knowledge to be dangerous.
Yeah.
If you're going to be a master, a pro at this, you need to stay with me for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we start out with a pocket knife, how to sharpen a pocket knife. In 4 years' time, you'll be making highboys,
wow,
beds, fancy stuff, and all in between. And from first day, we draw everything we build. I teach them how to be draftsmen. In fact, I got a couple of students who left after a couple of years and went to work for architects as draftsmen. So you get the draftsman thing. You learn how to figure materials. You learn all about wood. You learn all the hand tools, how to sharpen them, use them, adjust them. The first year, you're making stuff with hand tools only.
Wow.
And then we get into the shop tools after that. Then third year, there's a variety of projects they have to do. And then fourth year is senior project where you have to take something really hard to build, design it, and build it.
Are you finding your students to be someone who wants to get into that profession, or are more of them someone who's a doctor or a lawyer and uses it to relax?
No, I don't take any relaxers.
No relaxers.
No. When you
This is a professional.
Yeah, this is a professional school.
And how does someone get in touch with you if they're interested in that?
We're online. ChattanoogaWoodworking.com or .org or whatever.
If you Google Chattanooga Woodworking, they're gonna take you.
Yeah, we've got a application process online. Get students from all over the country. I've had students from California, Michigan, a lot of Georgia folks because it's close. We get a few locals, not many.
How many students in a typical class?
10's my max.
10's your max.
Yeah.
Looks like you enjoy yourself.
Oh, I do. Love it. My wife says, I got to quit. 76 years old. You've been doing this.
It's keeping you young,
Bill.
Bill.
Want to travel, blah, blah, blah. It's hard to blast me out of there.
I bet it is. I do want to ask you one last question, but before I do that, I do want to remind our listeners who makes all this possible. Thank you to the Tennessee Valley Authority for sponsoring My Morning Cup. Follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit TVA.com/do-good-here to explore exciting TVA career opportunities. All right, last question, Bill. What would you tell your 25-year-old self is important for a happy life?
Pick something that you enjoy doing. You don't have to love it, but you really have to like it, and then get good at that, and the money will follow. Whatever that is, it doesn't matter what profession it is. If it's something that you like to do, that when you get up in the morning, you want to go do it, and you don't look at the clock.
Yeah, don't look at the clock.
When you look at the clock, you say, oh, I only have another hour. I need 4 more hours to do this,
Yeah.
That kind of thing. When you work for the other man, you look at the clock.
Oh, yeah.
And when you work for yourself, you look at the clock and you never have enough time.
But one of the things you said that I find interesting, obviously the passion, but the money will follow. That is such a leap of faith for a lot of people, that the money will follow, particularly your Xerox example.
Well, you don't always succeed in one of these choices that you make early on. And maybe that's a good lesson. But I don't care what you do in life, if you become the best, the money will come. It's like Tommy Lupton told me when I left Heritage Landing. He said, well, son, he said, I hate to lose you, but you're probably doing the right thing. And over the years since then, he got me lots of work. I did lots of work for him. That didn't end our relationship.
That sticks with you, though, to hear from someone like Tommy Lupton say you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I appreciate you coming and talking to us today. This has been fun. Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Costa Media Advisors. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.